Welcome to a regular city council meeting for November 6th, 2024. We go to regular session. Sorry, Gordon. I just got chastised by the recording crew for not having my microphone on, so I will start that again. Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled city council meeting for November 6th, 2024. We have both a regular meeting this evening and an executive session for the council, so we're going to get right into it. Please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for our great community. I thank you especially for a peaceful, so far peaceful transition of power. And I know that we still have results to go on a number of things here in our state and in our country. I continue to pray that that things stay peaceful and that we come together as one country, as one state, and as one city moving forward. I ask for your wisdom for us as a council and the other leaders that make up our community. And I ask for your forever and ongoing grace. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening is new employee introductions. Do we have any, Eileen?
No.
Okay, but I do understand we might have one coming up.
Yes.
Perfect. Everyone gets to wait with bated anticipation. Next on our agenda is an opportunity for citizen input and community announcements. This is an opportunity for audience members to address the city council on items that are not on the agenda. If you are attending in person, please complete one of these fabulous yellow cards, which are right back there on the podium. Fill that out and bring that up to our city recorder, and she will make sure that I get it for your comments. If you would like to speak virtually, please contact the Deputy City Recorder by 4:30 on the Wednesdays of city council meetings, and we will make sure that we get you queued up for those comments. I have a card this evening, and it's from, and I'm sorry if I say this incorrectly, Mr. Dinteman?
Yeah, Dinteman.
Dinteman? Thank you, sir. Well, if you want to come up here to the table and you have your 3 minutes with us.
Because I have to sit down.
Well, if you don't have to if you don't want to, as long as you can speak loudly for the microphone.
That's why I'm close to the microphone.
Yeah.
I'm Brian Dinteman. I'm from the Historical Society, and we're in the middle of thinking about rebranding what we're doing with the museum and stuff.
Okay.
And I was in the middle of changing one of the little buildings in order to move some stuff on that was off-site, and got into a talk with the planning people, and they said, well, we're going to move all the roads around. And I would really like to have an opportunity to talk to the right people and see what we're going to try to do and change what it looks like. Is that going to go together with what the city wants to do, and especially what it's going to look like after the roads get all torn up and moved around? It'd be real nice to be able to work together and come up with something that's an organic, goes together look. And that's pretty much all I'm asking for is, who do I talk to and how do I get this conversation started? I think I sent you an email about it. Yes. A week or something ago.
I think I do remember that. And I think I did talk to somebody. Yes, we will get back to you on the planning of that. It's very much early in the
Yeah.
engineering stages.
Yeah, I went out
which
and
I believe
talked
I
to
told Nora this already. So, but.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I think everyone has had their fingers in this at one time or another.
Yes.
And it's my turn in the barrel.
Yeah, it was, your name didn't ring a bell until you said that. I was like, oh, yes, yeah, but it was Nora I was talking to before. So I believe that that is a very good idea to have you involved in those conversations, because if
Well,
you're
I
wanting
think
to
we could
plan
have
and you
fun.
don't know what we're doing, how can you plan what you're
Yeah,
doing, right?
there should be something we can do that will make what's kind of an eyesore right now, the way it is, into something that's really cool looking, that advertises Canby, that people want to see there. And by the way, it's right where everyone has to drive by when they're going into the event center at the fairgrounds.
Right.
So it'd be real nice to have something that can be.
Exactly, and the road changes are for safety reasons, because
Oh, yeah.
everybody blows that stop sign, as
Oh,
you probably know.
that's
So,
nuts.
yeah, so we need to kind of do a reconfiguration there.
Okay, well, so,
Mr.
you have my
Didman,
email.
yeah.
I do.
I will follow up with him.
Yeah, and actually,
I could
the
forward you-
gentleman that you're sitting
That'd be
next to this evening before you came up here
Yeah.
is probably the guy that you will have the most conversation with, as he
Yeah, I
is.
sort of gathered that when I was sitting there talking.
He knows all things planning related.
Everything that's going on.
Yes, and then some probably. So, yes, we will definitely keep you guys informed and work with you as that
Right.
starts to take shape here.
Well, great. That went
And
well.
and definitely sooner than later. So we appreciate you coming
Right.
in.
I haven't been to a town council meeting in 50 years. Last time I was at one was in the old building and Dad was mayor.
Goodness sakes.
that's
well,
right.
Welcome.
I've seen, we've got the pictures of all the previous mayors
He's
in
the
the
one in the
council.
middle at this end.
Yes, yes, perfect. Well, thank you. Okay, that's it that I have in terms of community announcements and yellow cards. We'll move into the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I move to approve the consent agenda, which consists of the appointment of team liaison Linnea Stormo to the Library Advisory Board with the term ending at the end of the 2025 school year.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Patton to approve the appointment of the teen liaison Linnea Stormo to the Library Advisory Board with a term ending at the end of the 2025 school year. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on our agenda this evening is a public hearing regarding the adoption of housing efficiency measures. So the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. The public hearing was noticed, and those who wish to speak were instructed to contact the deputy city recorder. And at this time, we have not received any requests to speak. Those that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents may indicate your desire to speak by raising your hands at this time or handing a yellow card to our city recorder. I'm not seeing any hands going up. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. We will have a staff report by our planning director, Don Hardy. We will then have questions by the hearing body if there is any. I will then open the public hearing for testimony.
So much for being so.
Proponents will have not more than 3 minutes, and then opponents may not have more than 3 minutes. I will then close the public hearing, and if there's any other additional questions by the hearing body, we will have that time to do that. After that, we will have discussion. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedures of the hearing? No? Okay. Then we will begin this with staff presentation. Mr. Hardy. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Well, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Talking about housing yet again tonight, and wanted to just make some introductory remarks to kind of set the stage, and I know Maya's going to bring up the PowerPoint here. Next, okay, I can do it, actually. So I just wanted to give an overview, kind of what we're focusing on tonight is housing efficiency measures. And the focus is really on those measures which include cottage cluster revisions to the plan unit development standards, and specifically the low-density residential R1 and medium-density residential R15 zones. Talk about the draft code, the Planning Commission recommendation for that. And the Planning Commission actually did give you all some homework here to do, to make some decisions. There was not plurality on the cottage cluster provisions, and there's 3 items that they wanted your input on. Our staff have made a recommendation on addressing those, but I wanted to give context at least to those items. There is some latitude in those items. Department of Land Conservation and Development has given us a bit of latitude on those, so I know this is a little bit unusual for you guys to have a direction from Planning Commission to resolve things, but I just wanted to set the stage for that. So just an overview again on why we're here really. The Oregon population forecast is our basis really for why we're addressing housing, and the housing needs analysis was completed with an inventory of buildable lands in the city, and based on the projections of about 6,000 new residents over the next 20 years. There was a need, obviously, for an urban growth boundary expansion, and tied in with that is the need to do housing efficiency measures, which are a way to limit the need for an expansion. There's more to it than that, but essentially it's a way to reduce the need for the expansion. We also were in the housing needs analysis piece of identifying that there is a need for more diversification of housing variety in the city, with the desired outcome of being that those would be more affordable housing units for folks that are struggling to buy a home. And really our focus tonight is really on home ownership. It's really not focused on multifamily. It's focused on really a single family type of housing units in particular. And the next slide goes in. I'm going to go through a few things here again, repeating myself a bit. But there's about 1,873 housing units that are forecasted that are needed over the next 20 years. The split of that need is about 30% standard lots, which are traditional single-family detached lots, about 32% single-family small lot and cottages, 19% townhomes and plexes, and 19% apartments. Housing production strategy, this is what you're going to be seeing early next year, but the housing production strategy is also another element that you all will be hearing more about, I think at C4 as well as tonight, just briefly in terms of what those are. That's again beyond the housing efficiency measures that are basically to address other housing needs in the housing needs analysis. And to identify actions and policies, and there's 12 strategies that we currently have. Those are going to need to get addressed a little bit more deeply by the Planning Commission and City Council. We did get some input from Department of Land Conservation and Development on those, and there's a little bit more work to be done on those. Those strategies really are effectively to implement over a 5 to 8 year period. They could include actions like code changes or policies, those kinds of things that we would need to implement over a 5 to 8 year period. There's a check-in point at year 4 for those. And again, there's a work session with the Planning Commission and City Council that will be happening in early 2025. We're still doing some more fact-finding, and some of that will actually be helpful. I'll be participating, just listening in on the C4 work session tomorrow night for those communities that have adopted housing production strategies to get a bit more information on that. So housing efficiency measures, again, we're focusing again on cottage clusters and planning unit development revisions in our current code. And this has been somewhat of a long journey. We've had a housing advisory committee, a lot of community outreach, Planning Commission and City Council work sessions. Again, it's housing efficiency measures. These are kind of low-hanging fruit in some ways for this community. They are still housing units that are single-family ownership is essentially the focus here on those. And again, even with those housing efficiency measures, there's about 73 acres of urban growth boundary expansion that's still needed. And so with that, I'm going to launch into a bit more about the housing efficiency measures. There are a number of, the cottage cluster development code is really, I'll go through that in a bit here, but that's going to be a brand new code that we will end up, I'll describe that a bit more. There's some adjustments in this low density and medium density residential zones that are necessary to implement both the cottage cluster and tie those to those two zones, as well as the plan unit development code and tie those to those two zones. I did want to mention that on the plan unit development in particular, if there are, it applies to new development using PUDs and prior PUDs, and there are some in the city. If one wanted to use those in a prior PUD, they would have to comply with the new PUD standards to do that. Again, tonight is not about multifamily design standards in the R2 high density zone, and it's not about skinny streets. We are not proposing skinny streets. We're proposing standard street sections that we currently have on our code. So this is not about narrow streets with higher density issues. So, and just an aside, also Canby Fire will be involved with these review processes as well, and we have reached out to them. So those standards would end up having to apply as well. So the questions for the Planning Commission that we didn't have plurality on regarding the cottage cluster, that was the only item that really was, of all the code sections, the cottage cluster was the one that came back with, the Planning Commission came back with questions. They were unanimous in their support of the rest of the code for plan unit developments and the changes to R1 and R15. But the questions that they were looking at is 1 or 2 parking spaces per cottage unit. That's a question for you all tonight. I think some of the debate around 1 or 2 units has to do with the type of units these are, and there may only be one person with 1 car, but there could be 2 people, and so that our recommendation, I'll go into that in a bit, is probably on the more conservative side of that, and then the other part of this is exclude pathways from common courtyard areas. And that there's a common courtyard requirement, so there's basically these cottages look out onto a courtyard, which is part of the amenity of living in those facilities, is there's a courtyard area, and that's kind of the common open space. So should we exclude the pathways from the need for common courtyard areas? And then the last one was adjacency to other residential areas and having a 3-foot or 6-foot hedge or fence. And that's the last question. And then, like I said, all the other code sections were not in question by the Planning Commission. So we're looking at, we're just suggesting 1 parking space per cottage unit. There is no maximum parking, but that is the minimum. It's up to you all. If you feel like 2 spaces should be put in there, that would not be anything we would resist here. It felt like there was somewhat of a split with the Planning Commission again on whether it should be 1 or 2. The pathways we would recommend being excluded from that to make the courtyard slightly bigger than they would otherwise. And so this, if people put in large pathways, those would not be counted towards the courtyard open space requirement. They're still going to need to put pathways in to connect to the courtyard. So we would recommend excluding those so the courtyard area was slightly larger. Finally, we would recommend 6-foot tall fence required for abutting residential areas, as long as those do not obscure site distance requirements, because sometimes, depending on where they're located, that gets a little tricky as to where that actually is. And you can't put a 6-foot fence in a site distance restricted area. So I'm going to come back to these. You all don't need to address this right now because I've got more to talk about, but so we're going to dive in. And if I get into the weeds here and you guys say, we really don't need to get in the weeds tonight, let me know, because I don't want to get in the weeds if you all don't want to get in the weeds.
No one likes weeds.
So cottage clusters, we're going to start with that. So it would allow in the low density and medium density residential outright cottage clusters would be allowed. They are a form-based design. They're based on underlying design standards. We largely use the Oregon model code for cottage clusters. We did make some adjustments to the model code. They were not substantial. One item the Planning Commission strongly felt that they wanted to have was a type 3 review process, which means they are reviewing and approving this through a hearings process. A lot of the communities that are adopting these, they're doing type 2 with notice. Some are doing type 1. There is no bright line right now legally for preventing a type 3 review process. We've sought legal counsel on this as well as during this process, and so there's no punitive elements that currently exist, so we are recommending to continue with the type 3 process. These lots could also be subsequently divided. I think that probably is the intent of, we have some early developers that are signaling that they may want to try this out in the areas on the north side of town, Special Area J, that where they were looking at that, and they would be more like a subdivision, but you could also have a commonality of cottage clusters where they're not subdivided and they're more like a condominium setting, so that they would be allowed in both settings. Cottage clusters would have a minimum of 6 units per acre. The maximum density is based on the design parameters. And I'm going to do the best I can to explain the design parameters because we have some sketches here that are conceptual. But what we saw, and we did a lot of work on these in terms of looking at examples, running that through the Planning Commission, et cetera. It was really more in the 8 to 10, 8 to 11 dwelling units an acre category. The R15 zone allows 13 dwelling units an acre. The R1 zone allows 6 units per acre. So it is more lots, but they do have a different configuration, and they are in a common open space element that is part of this. So this is the drawing here, and this is, again, really kind of giving you kind of a concept, and it's difficult because all these look different in different communities and the ones that we looked at, but I think what this kind of gives you an example of that, you can kind of see the common open space in the center of the courtyard where the units are facing out on that, and a minimum of 50% of the cottages must be oriented to the common courtyard. Cottage orientation to the common courtyard must be within 10 feet of the courtyard. Cottages must be connected to the common courtyard by a pedestrian path, so they have to all be able to connect to that. Cottages must abut the courtyard on at least 2 sides. The common courtyard must be at least 15 feet wide, and front yard setbacks match the minimum setback of the underlying zone, which is 20 feet. So that's not inconsistent with the R1 and R15 zone now. It's 20-foot setbacks. And parking facilities should be screened. And again, this gets back to the 3 to 6 foot provision on that we were talking about, shall be screened from public streets. And we've noted a 3-foot landscaping fencing wall. I think that's a bit different. That's screening from a street, but if there's an abutting residential area, that was the question the Planning Commission was asking. Should it be 3 feet or 6-foot high fence? But there would be screening along the street as well. Now, the configuration here shows common parking in that area. Some of these may end up having parking in individual driveways as well. That's not prohibitive. There's not a one-size-fits-all here. Generally, these, the units also ranged that we looked at throughout other communities in terms of their sizes. Some of them are more standard size, but the units sizes have varied. And I'm going to go to the next slide. This gives a little bit more detail here. You can kind of see a oblique view of this with the common courtyard area. They have design features again, and the range of the unit sizes that are in the code that are proposed is 600 to 1,200 square foot living space areas. We believe the target that at least of some developers here is probably in the 1,000 to 1,200 range, and so they'd be probably single story, but you could have 2-story units as well. That would not be prohibited. The cottages must be clustered around generally oriented to common open space areas I mentioned. And community buildings can also be provided, and they do count for some of the courtyard area, but there's an adjustment that was made by the Planning Commission to limit that to 25% of the required courtyard area. And parking can be provided at a dedicated lot or on individual garages or carports, as I mentioned. This shows some garages, which is, again, a concept, and that's part of that discretion that someone would have in designing these. Standards require that parking areas are screened from residential properties, and that's the 3 to 6 foot discussion. So the R1 and R15 codes, I was going to jump to those. This needs to tie back to the cottage cluster ordinance so that we actually have a thematically consistent code. And these are adjustments that are made to allow cottage clusters. They're in your packet. And the allowing fourplexes as an outright permitted use in R15 is part of that packet. That's currently a conditional use permit to have a fourplex. Allow townhomes as permitted uses, but only as part of a planned unit development that's in R1. So if you want to do a PUD in R1 and have townhomes, you need to do a PUD, in other words, to be able to do townhomes in R1, otherwise they're not allowed. Limit townhomes to a maximum grouping of 6 consecutive townhomes in either zone with groupings separated by at least 10 feet. And then establishing the following development standards for townhomes: a 20-foot front yard setback in both zones, and 1,800 square foot minimum lot size if constructed as part of a PUD in both zones. Otherwise, it would be the standard 3,000 square foot lot size that's currently in our code in R15. And again, establishes a maximum density of 6 dwelling units per acre in the R1 zone. So that kind of concludes the cottage cluster piece. I'm going to stop there and take a breath because you guys all may have some questions.
Yes, I'm sure that we do. Yes, Councilor Maldonado.
How many square foot is each lot? Each individual lot, not the living space, but the lot itself?
And that is going to be based on the design standards, and I figured you all would ask that question. And so let me go back to the graphic here.
Good
Because I
predictability.
counted eight units in the graphic.
And so, again, because this is form-based design, and some of this will depend on if you all decide to do 1 or 2 minimum parking spaces per unit tonight. I think what you're looking at is, I think the lots would likely be in I'm guessing the 3,000 to 4,000 square foot size area. That would be, the indication from at least some that are interested is in the 4,000 square foot size range. But I mean, if you start doing the math, you reduce it by taking the courtyard out, and you take out the parking, and you take out the required setback areas, you can get to kind of a general idea of what that is. The one variable here is this design here is somewhat conceptual, and I'm believing that more of this area would be taken up by fire code requirements dealing with access. Jim's nodding.
Jim's nodding.
So,
Jim, you already have problems with this design?
Jim's already got his questions lined up.
so I think that, like, the general answer, I think, is you're probably looking in the 4,000 plus, 4,000 to 5,000 is my general guess on what that is. It's really difficult to give you an exact answer to that question, but they need to meet all those requirements: the commonality of the courtyard area, the parking standards that need to be met, and the setbacks are generally the same setback standards that we have in the underlying base zones of R1 and R15, and those are not insignificant when you start removing those from the site. And then from there, it's like, how big are the lots, which is a great question. And you could do this in a configuration more in a condominium style as well. There's also the issue, on the fire suppression side, that's going to influence a bit of this as well. At some point, are they going to be sprinkled if there's multi-story and those kinds of things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Stearns?
Well, just a question. So Two questions kind of related. So has there been demand for these in Canby, or are developers requesting to put these in? What's the, is it something that?
We've had some initial conversations with some residential developers in this community, and they are interested in doing this in possible combination with the planned unit development. And it's a tool, and part of this is maybe just backing up. I think the target really is the affordability piece, just in general, for ownership for anything that's single-family ownership is super difficult at this point with the cost of housing. So we have that issue that is part of this is looking at ways to provide different code that would allow a variety of product type. And then we have the other piece of this, which is we have the need to do an urban growth boundary based on the population projection. And this is a housing efficiency measure, which means it shall be done or you will not be able to do your urban growth boundary. So there's a bit of both the need based on the cost of homes and also the need based on the fact that to do an urban growth boundary expansion, these kinds of things have to be adopted, which are single-family residential oriented in their nature. I do believe this would largely apply more to larger greenfield areas than infill. I don't really see this as an infill product type that would be desirable or cost-effective in its nature. So I think you're dealing with larger acreage to be able to pull this off to make it work.
So part of this is,
Counselor Stearns, your mic.
Yeah.
my apologies.
So I guess what you're saying, part of this is, the proverbial gun to our head saying, do this or else we won't let you get you any more land. And the other thing is, are these, well, actually, the kind of two questions that go together. Sorry, every question generates more questions. But so I apologize for that. And you may not know the answer to these questions, but are these generally going to be investor-owned, or is it going to be like a condominium type arrangement where somebody would buy it? Or is it going to be, usually these are leased units?
And I can't completely answer that, but from the indication that we have from a potential developer of these, they'd be single-family fee-owned. They would be lesser expensive units, and they'd be fee-owned.
Okay, and then the follow-up question on that, and you may not know the answer to this question, but I think it's a question that I have, is I'm sure these things have been done other places around in
They
Oregon.
have been. In fact, there's multiple examples.
And the question is, how do these hold their value over time? So is it start out with nice and then get degraded as the demographic changes, or do they generally keep their resale value high? And I know we may not know that exact answer, but I'm curious to see whether that's something that would be considered an asset that people would have, or something that they would just want to get out of as quickly as they can.
And I think it's a great question. The challenge, this does provide a variety of housing types. It does, I think, reduce to some degree the price point, but these are not like cheap. So these units, depending on what you look at, I'm just saying that in regard to it's a diversification. It's less expensive than a standard detached lot with a large home on it, for sure. But I think the ones that we looked at looked really nice, and they were, and we didn't see any, and we were not intentionally looking for ones that were like not good looking, but almost every one of these, I think they were designed well, and they look like they were built with amenities that would be typical of what you would see in at least a condominium style development. And our planning commission looked at those examples throughout the metro area. We didn't see any that were like, hey, this doesn't look good. That doesn't mean that I can promise you that, but like what's out there, this is a niche market, I think, in terms of like developers doing this kind of thing. And so I think they kind of understand what this is. It is not at the density that you're seeing, like in Portland, where, I mean, this is a step less than that, but it's definitely a step more than what Canby has seen in terms of variety. And we just don't have those tools here to deal with this. These are, and that's really, I think, part of this is, I mean, aspirationally, it's just trying to hit a price point that actually allows more people to buy in here, which is really difficult right now. I can't tell you what kind of family might live there or not a family or, who this is for, but it does provide a variety, at least, of diversity to provide for that opportunity for those people that have that desire, which I believe there are a number of them, based on the information from our housing needs analysis.
Thank you. That, sure.
Counselor Davis, and then Counselor Patton.
I think you was first, wasn't you?
I don't know.
Whatever.
He's planning on taking all the
I'll
time.
get everyone.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Don, first of all, I appreciate the Planning Commission and your guys' work on this, because I think it's important that we do vet this out. We do take the time and do it right, because, and also, has there been discussion about different options other than just this one? In other words, other communities have done these very effectively. And some of the ones that I've recently have looked at on these, they actually are going back to alleyways. So a narrow alleyway and parking at the garage down the alleyways. And that way it keeps the front access ways open for people for visitors and things like that. And then they do have parking areas like that. But it does keep the road open so that people can get in there. But I don't know if they've considered other options. So would you build a standard and then let the developer present something?
And there, I mean, to your point, I mean, absolutely, there was even and I didn't want to overwhelm you all with like the pictures that we had from all the other presentations we've done. But yes, you absolutely could do a variety of things and still meet the intent of this code. This picture does not represent what you would have to build here. In fact, if anything, there's a lot of variety that you could end up coming back with, and as long as you met the other requirements, you could. It's a form-based design feature, so it could be alley. They could do alley loaded. Some of these had, where they had parking set aside, and it was kind of adjacent, but it was kind of behind the units, and I think there is a variety of things, styles that could be developed out of this code that is for you tonight. So it's very difficult because once you show a picture, then people get that locked in and like, this is the only thing you're going to see. And I think it might even look, I mean, there's a lot of different things on design in the site and how it's characterized and its shape of it and those kinds of things that have to be factored in. I do believe that going through and having a type 3 process, even though it's supposed to be non-discretionary, is not a bad thing either, because the Planning Commission and us as the staff get to go through and talk about those issues, and both related to what does this look like? What are the dimensions and what are the options that people have? Yeah,
I think just making the options open for developers to kind of choose, because on something like this, you're definitely going to have access way problems, most likely have to have sprinklered houses, and that drives the cost up versus being able to design clusters with alleyways behind it, because now you've got access ways to
let me
get to those.
advance. I have one more graphic, and this may not.
You do.
If I can get to it. This is not necessarily helping exactly, Jim, but this is another, it's another example of what this may or may not look like. I mean, so again, there's a variety of things. It was difficult because we were working with our consulting team on showing these, and I think, that may not help a lot, but just to give you an idea that there are different ways to make this work.
Right. And I appreciate that. I think that, but my only point is, how do we keep the costs down?
Yeah.
Because it's typically people downsizing and into their retirement years, or for new people wanting a first-time buyer.
Exactly, and I think to the extent, I mean, that would all be kind of sorted at the beginning, front end of the pre-application process when people come in, or before that when, sorry. Was that me? Okay. Okay, yeah, no worries. That, your points are excellent. I think that would be something we'd obviously, in the front end load of this, would want to talk through, clearly with fire and play and that discussion, and also with design considerations. But I do believe there's a ton of variety, and I would just say that I believe most of the examples that we showed the Planning Commission as examples were using the standard template. This is what we're doing tonight. And there was quite a difference of variety on these in different communities.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Patton.
So I know the planning commission has spent a fair amount of time on this, so I trust the base work that they've done. I'm going to stick to the 3 questions essentially. First of all, the sidewalk, just to make sure I'm understanding this properly. The reason you're talking about omitting the sidewalk from the calculation is so that there will be more green space or more active space for people to use, rather than it being taken up by pathways and sidewalks and stuff, correct?
That's essentially it. I mean, you arguably could say that the pathways are an amenity as well. I feel like it's not a huge ask of a developer to, have that reduced, have that not count towards the courtyard. I think that seems appropriate to me.
Okay, excellent. My second question then is regarding the fencing. It sounds like you are, the question is, in this scenario, the diagram with the model mock cottage cluster here, that there would be, the request, currently it would be like a 3-foot fence all the way around, but what we're trying to accomplish is a 6-foot fence like on the sides and in the back where it's going to be up against residential housing, but then 3 feet along the street area where this street parking is. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the street would be 3 feet, and then let's assume that like the right-hand side was abutting a residential area. That would be a 6-foot high fence versus a 3-foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know there's been some work done on updating the fence codes in general. How does that fit in with what the Planning Commission is working on with fence codes in general?
It would be consistent because it would be a shared yard. I mean, essentially, there's no street involved, so that's really makes it pretty easy for us because other property would likely put a fence in anyway. So, I mean, either this would be the common fence or they would put their own fence in.
Okay, and so just one last thing about the fencing. So where it's at the street, where the 6 feet come up to the street, it would be consistent where there'd actually be a bit of a setback. So the 6 feet doesn't come all the way up to the street for visibility
It
reasons.
would have to step down, and the Planning Commission is still dealing with, we're still dealing with the fence code, but right now, and I believe it's going to stay the same way, where there's a step down. I mean, it's a site visibility issue, but there are certain exceptions to that we've talked about for alleys. I don't want to go into the detail tonight, but yeah, I think that generally speaking, it'll be a step down.
Okay, awesome. And then my last thing is I have, I understand where the Planning Commission is coming from with the parking. Back when I was on there, that was something that gave us all tremendous heartburn, was the fact that people want to consider street parking as their parking, and it just becomes a hot mess. And so, but I also understand that with these cottage clusters, the goal is to be able to get a little higher density, and to do that, you need to sacrifice some of the parking space in order to get the housing space. So, I mean, in my opinion, I like to kind of split things down the middle. And so, instead of 1 space, I could see doing something like 1.5 spaces per cottage cluster. So that way, like in this scenario that you have here with 8 buildings or 8 cottages, if it's just 1 parking space per cottage, then that's 8 parking spaces for that whole area. And so although the other 8 people or 7 cars or 5 cars would need to find parking somewhere else.
On the street, of course.
Correct. Whereas if you went with two parking spaces per cottage, now you would have to try and work 16 spaces into this area, which would take up a ton of room of the buildings. Now, if you did 1.5 spaces, you'd essentially be figuring 12 spaces for this cottage cluster. So there would still be some flexibility there. To me, that would provide some better space and some, what I would consider more ample parking for that, figuring maybe some people will have 2 cars, some people will have 1. And you would essentially, I would consider it like round up to the most even parking space. So if it would be 5, 2, 4, 6, like 8.5 parking spaces, it would actually be 9 parking spaces that would need to be put in there. So instead of allowing them to round down, essentially putting in there that they would need to round up to the highest full parking space. My other thoughts are like with the fencing, I think the fencing makes sense. Instead of doing the 3 feet all the way around, making it more consistent with our current fence codes with the 6 and 3. And then for the sidewalks, I personally think that the more green space would be better. We talk about needing parks and outdoor spaces and stuff, and so I would be for omitting the walkways from the green space calculation.
Council President Hensley?
I just have a couple of thoughts. I like that it's going to be a type 3 review. I want the planning commission to be involved with every one of these developments that happen. I agree that the sidewalks don't need to be included. The green space is good. I do have concerns about parking, what that would look like if you only have 1 per unit, because the reality, no matter what the movement's trying to be, the reality is houses have at least 2 cars. So, if there's more than 1 human in the house. So I would like to see a good solution around the parking, to have 2 per unit. But that's just my 2 cents.
Dawn, I think a statement and a question, part of it piggybacks on Councilor Stearns, but, in terms of the success of product like this, there's a developer in Central Oregon, predominantly there, that does a lot of this product, and they do a great job with that kind of cottage cluster piece, and they've done a number of things, both single story and even going vertical to where it's a 2-story product on still kind of that postage size lot. They generally do tend to be 2 to 3 bedrooms in 1 bath, because it's either like rounding, they're moving down or this is their first home piece. So they do meet their stick build versus like a manufactured home piece. So they are good quality, or should be. Anything that gets taken care of or is built with, by the developers that we've seen coming through Canby, hopefully they aren't cutting corners and making a shoddy product for people to move into. I guess my questions, and I'll save other pieces for our discussion. The developer you've been talking to, most of it has been wanting to do single story or 2-story.
And I'm not 100% sure if the conversation, I think, was more single story was the conversation, and that's kind of where that was at. But again, I can't say this is a committed situation, but
Sure.
that was the general gist of it, was like starter homes, 1,000, 1,200 square feet.
Okay. Also to piggyback on Councilor Stern's comment about the purpose or the proposed use for a development like this, it's always been a concern of mine, and going back to a couple city managers ago and having this conversation in terms of looking at trying to get this developed here in Canby and finding, the conversation always seemed to be we need like 3 to 5 acres to do something that's substantial enough with roads and sidewalks and all that to meet that need. my biggest concern has always been that these would get scooped up and all of a sudden become rentals and not the starter home. And I'm going to use the air quotes of affordable because that it's different for everybody and what that price point is going to look like when this comes about remains to be seen. But I do worry about that aspect of being able to move in, have something you own, build that opportunity that renting just does not provide. And so I don't know how much input we as a city can have and impact the CCNRs for a development like this down the road, or even from the very beginning, because that seems to be a concern for me. And again, that's something maybe for a later conversation than tonight, but
No, I actually want to address that.
Oh,
because-
please.
Because the planning commission actually had some of the same comments.
Okay.
And on page 2, we've added language for that specifically, dealing with covenants, easements, or recorded documents shall be provided to the city prior to the certificate of occupancy of the first unit or prior to the final plat if the cottage cluster is proposed to be subdivided, addressing access and maintenance of all shared common areas or common facilities, including but not limited to storm sewers, stormwater facilities, drainage ways, open space, landscaping, and shared parking facilities. So that was the intention of that, and that's a great point. I mean, part of this is it's, how is this going to be maintained, et cetera? And again, not knowing what the ownership is going to be, I would presume these are if they're single-family detached lots, that it would seem like those would not be rentals to me, but if they were in common ownership, I mean, maybe more so. Again, it's a bit of a guess. Yeah.
So then my questions regarding the the parking situation, it does tend to focus around the idea of product that has a garage to it. Is that, I think versus a parking lot, I don't know how much, again, I think that the garage component, whether it's a single car garage, then you throw in them being able to have a car in the driveway that meets that 2-car conversation piece. And almost, I don't think street parking should be a viable option in something like this if we're trying to maximize its efficiency. So again, I don't know what product is being discussed or what that would look like. I just know, like, in some of those pieces that, the garage is around the back, and those alleyway pieces tend to be kind of popular in that regards. Again, I'll go back to post, World War II housing, which is very much kind of what we're talking about here in terms of sizes of those homes. There was still a garage, but it kind of was kind of off, kind of tucked in around the back corner of the house where it was a detached garage, but it still created that density piece that I think that we're looking for.
And I would say that, and these kind of show that, in that, and it's hard to know what folks are, we're not prohibiting garages from happening, and that would be more of a traditional kind of situation. It's a bit tricky because not knowing, like, is there going to be a garage or is it just a common open parking area? That becomes a bit of a challenge, but I hear what you're saying. Maybe where, I don't know if that influences this, where a garage is provided, maybe that influences the amount of parking. I don't want to make this too complicated, but
Sure.
I think that's maybe where you're going with that discussion.
Yeah, again, I think, just again, asking the question for clarification on kind of wrapping my mind around the whole parking question that's being asked for here in a little bit, so. All right, Councilor Patton?
Yeah, so regarding the rentals thing, I know in certain areas, it will be set up where, like, it's built in the code that only a certain percentage of buildings or houses or whatever can be used as rentals. Is that something that the city could do in its code to say within like a particular zone or whatnot, only such a percentage of that can be a rental? So like, let's say this cottage cluster thing, that it's by ordinance or by code, only like 10% of it can be rentals. All the rest of it has to be individually owned and like that sort of thing. Do we have the ability as a city to do something like that?
I think it'd be really difficult to add this in and get it past the mark for, this, with the housing efficiency measures with the LCD, if we added something like that. But to your question, I think if there was a rental policy, I would also probably include short-term rentals discussions in that, because it would feel like we're targeting.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
I would
just-
consider all rentals, short-term and long-term.
Yeah, because I think that that's a pretty broad conversation. I think the city probably could do it. I just think that it would be very difficult to pass muster here with this ordinance too.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking of
Yeah,
I'm thinking of like when we crack open the,
Code and like
The
next year,
code
next
after
year.
the house,
No, and I was
after all of
thinking,
this
no,
stuff.
and some of this, really, to be honest, I mean, there will be that revisitation, and that's again, the context and the housing production strategy is all those codes and those strategies are going to have to be tested through those lenses that we're looking at. And you'll all be seeing more of that discussion as well in work sessions before we even adopt that. But yeah, that clearly could be part of that discussion. Some things will fall off, some things will stay on.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that Councilor Davis has a question here, but I just, that whole like, what do we got to answer these three questions to move on to the next piece of being able to get it submitted and passed, and maybe that's something we circle back later and change after.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but no, I mean.
Not that I'm promoting any trickiness with, the DLCD and the
Well, no,
LDCD
your question just brought that up. And so I was just curious as to whether we would eventually have an option to maybe do something like that citywide, not just in this little area.
For sure.
So, okay, there you go.
Councilor Davis.
Thanks, Mayor. Don, I don't want to drive back the whole access way to get to those, right? But no matter how you look at it, and piggybacking what the mayor was talking about, I think parking is going to be critical on this, because of the fact that if you have so many acres and somebody comes in and wants to develop a cluster housing area, okay, and all of a sudden we say, well, you got to have this wide of streets with no parking on either side. Okay, now where are the people going to park if you now put them on site, and now you don't have the access way to get to those units? You see what I'm saying? So I think that the access way has to be specifically designed into the design of that cluster housing area, because you're going to use up area for those access ways or for parking. And so I think I'd hate to have a developer come in and then all of a sudden we say, you've got to have this wide of streets. There you're going, well, that's going to take out two cluster houses in order to do that. You see what I'm saying? So I think the street design and parking is going to be critical on these.
And my vision of this is really new areas that have not been developed.
Right.
I mean, that's
Same thing.
well, but I would say that the standard cross-section would allow parking on this with the complete streets cross-section that we have on our current code. I think our standards allow that and would still meet fire code. I think some existing streets in Canby, I do agree, don't meet that, and they have to be signed on one side because they're not meeting that. But the idea behind this is that, I mean, my vision is that this would apply to areas that have not yet been developed, that would be having brand-new streets built through them, where you could have parking on the sides of the streets, on both sides, because it does meet the cross-sections of the standard of the city. I think this this may be a test case in some ways in those areas where if a developer wants to come in and try this product and realizes that there really isn't sufficient parking because we actually have built into this about guest parking here, then that has to be tested out as part of this, and the Planning Commission would look at that as well, which is if there's not on-street parking, then there's a different standard that would apply in the code. It'd be, so I hear what you're saying. I would say that to some degree, this product may not work for some areas, and they're going to have to developers going to have to do due diligence. I think this is going to be more in areas that have largely are more green open areas that have not yet been developed than that would be for infill.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, so I mean, great point, but I think the answer might be no, because it just doesn't work. This may not work for that, because I don't think this is an infill product type. As much as it is a new development product type.
Right. Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions on these three? Yes, Counselor Stearns.
Just a comment, because I don't think I made it clear earlier, but I agree that there should be 2 spots per unit, because if you don't have 2 spots per unit,
Yeah.
they're going to be parking on the street.
Yep.
And the only way to keep them from parking on the street is code enforcement, but people are people, and we are a bedroom community, and unless that changes, everybody who lives in Canby, or we saw from the last work session a few weeks ago, that it's like 85% of the people that live in Canby work somewhere else, and so until that number changes, you're going to have to just plan on having 2 cars per
One car
unit.
per adult, yeah.
Counselor Sassy, you look like you're about to comment or would like to.
I would like to, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like these. Do we have an idea ballpark of what, you've seen this before, what the prices are?
I mean, they vary, and I mean, if it was an individual home, I'm just taking a bit of a wild guess. I mean, you're probably in the 350 plus range.
Okay, I was
easily.
hoping
I mean,
we-
these are not like really super inexpensive homes. But that's not 700,000, which is probably what the opposite is on a standard lot. Or
I was
more.
hoping you'd be under 400, so.
Yeah, I mean,
now.
yeah.
For now, yeah.
But that's still expensive, and so I think part of that is, I think, but it does provide a bit of more opportunity than does exist now.
Yeah. I love these. The first thing that'll wreck it is rentals. Guaranteed. Then that wrecks your parking. It will help if 2 of the places, like this is just classic example, 2 of them have garages, whether they use the garage or not, because that'll be, we know, how that goes. But that would help immensely. But yeah, I think 1.5, 2, I think is stretching it. 1.5, I think is more appropriate. And I like the fence design. I'm not a hedge guy, because hedges start out like this, and next thing you know, they're this. It just eats up space. Fence never eats up space. So.
All right. Any other questions for staff? No? Okay. Then I'm going to open up the public hearing for any testimony.
I actually have a ways to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, Don, I'm sorry. I was a little excited. I thought we were like,
Don, you need to do, Don,
yeah, you got to tell us to like, yeah.
That's why I said early on, if you want to get in the
I missed
weeds.
that part. Elected officials in a microphone can be dangerous. All right. Don, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay. So we're now going into the planning and development code changes.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to be quick, though, on this. These are updates to the planning and development, and I'm going to try to hit the high points on this and make this fairly hopefully understandable to you all fairly quickly. So the updates to the code are on our planning and developments is, in order to even qualify for this, you'd have to have 15% of the site area be committed to open space. And there is a very specific definition of usable open space, and I can go into the details of that if you'd like, which does differ substantially than some of the PUDs that you might already be aware of in the city that may not be as attractive in that sense. And so I just want to be clear that that's the beginning bar here is a 15%. It does exempt acreage associated with cottage clusters, so if you combine them and a PUD together, the exempts the cottage cluster piece because it already has its own open space requirements from the PUD portion. So if you did a cottage cluster and a PUD together, it would only be the PUD portion that would be subject to the 15%. There is a density bonus, 20% of the maximum density established in the base zones. That's also a provision, but it has very specific criteria to that, which addresses that it has to be, again, usable open space, not wetlands, not steep slopes, high quality, and there's actually a 5% dwelling unit for single-family homes. The 5% of those have to be single-family, single-story. That's to basically look at both the diversification of maybe starter homes as well as the elderly. So that's another piece of this. Allows PUDs across multiple zones to spread and blend the density across the PUD according to the underlying base zone. So if there's an R1 and R15, you could spread the density across, but the density is still calculated based on the base zones. So R1 and R15, those zones would have to be factored cumulatively. They'd have to be looked at individually as R1, R15, but cumulatively, that would be your total, and then 20% would be allowed beyond that if you can meet the exceptions to the criteria which the Planning Commission has control over. And plan unit developments do have discretion by their very nature. They are a discretionary process, and so there would be automatically a Type 3 review process with those through the Planning Commission. It does create the requirement that the lower intensity uses abut other lower intensity, and you have higher intensity more in the interior of the PUD as well, and that would be something the Planning Commission would have to look at.
That makes sense.
And that kind of, well, I guess it wasn't as much as I thought, but.
I think we already had discussion and
Okay,
questions.
so anyway, I'm going to go back to this, and if there are questions on the PUD, did I skip slides?
It's okay.
Okay, maybe I already covered that, okay.
So there doesn't seem to be anything done
My knees
in this
are
area here that the planning commission needs.
No,
us to
well,
clarify
unless
anything.
you all want to get into that, the Planning Commission vetted this and they didn't defer anything back to you all, and we've made their changes, so, yeah.
No, I mean, whatever, I mean, it's up to which of the council here, but I think it's, planning commission's vetted, I mean, a lot of this very, very well, so.
And I'm just going to go back to the questions for cottage clusters, so you can, whoever makes the motion can bake that in, and then you all can vote on it.
Okay, so are you officially done, so I can?
Oh,
open the
yeah,
public
I
hearing?
mean, we have the hearing process,
Yes.
sorry.
No, I don't want to jump the gun again. We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right,
So,
then I'm going to open the public hearing and hear from any proponents, which I don't think there were any, or any opponents. So officially, we will close the public hearing on that.
That was the fastest public hearing we've had.
Any other questions on the matter for staff? No? Okay, so discussion. For a couple that, kind of that 1.5 kind of, or to 2 parking, like, is there a hard and fast? You're saying, Councilor Patton?
No, I've got my hand
One-
raised.
Yeah, question?
Well, it sounds to me like the sidewalks, you know, it sounds to me like we agree on the side, I don't know, it sounds like we agree on the sidewalks, that the
Yes.
sidewalks should not be included. And it
Yes,
sounds like we agree on the fence thing,
being 6 feet.
being 6 feet and 3.
Yeah.
I guess maybe we need to clear the chairs and then duke it out as far as cars parked. And let's put up a bracket and see how that works out.
Well,
Well-
they could have a motorcycle, Jason.
Well, true, but 2 motorcycles, I don't know.
Motorcycle and a car fit in the same spot.
Yeah.
Well,
But no, I mean,
guess,
seriously, there's 2 adults, there's 2 cars.
Councilor Maldonado?
You know, with my work, I actually do have quite a few of these communities, and we have 2. We have 2 parking spots per, just because street parking becomes an absolute nightmare. 1.5 is good on a few of them, and we do have, I think, 1 or 2 that has 1.5. But when it comes down to it, it is ultimately 2. Otherwise, I get calls daily, daily with parking, and it'll be from either tow yards or residents. So for me, I would say 2.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't,
For 3.
Daniel wants 3.
There's going to be somebody at 3 anyway. Somebody's going to have kids and they're going to take the 2.
Well, and there is no maximum. I mean, I'm just, I mean, this is the minimum, so.
yeah. Guess I'll ask you a question, Don. Is there a way, or, and this may be trying to split things more in half than maybe need to be, or trying to fit an oval peg in a round hole, but could it be situated in, depending on the number of units? Like 1.5 versus 2? Or is that getting too much, too complicated?
I think that gets to be too much.
That's the question.
Yeah. I like clean and clear.
Okay.
So, yeah, just as a, if it's okay,
Yeah.
just as a comment, I think one of the issues with parking is who's paying for the parking. If we have 2 parking spots, then a homeowner is paying for the parking.
Right.
If we have 1 or 1.5, then the public is paying for the parking because it's going to go onto the streets. And the question is, who is taxed at that place? Is it the owner pays for his parking, or is it going to be the public going to pay for that parking? And obviously, the person could have a kid or something and have 3 parking spots. The public might have to absorb some of that. But I think having planned, we need a plan for as much as possible that the person who purchases it vicariously through the developer is one that's paying for that parking. Because the parking is going to be there. We're not going to be anytime soon, even though I've talked to you guys about changing that. Right now, we're a bedroom community, and so you're not going to survive as a homeowner without, cars. So that's kind of what I wanted to point out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's Councilor Milano.
And just to touch on yours, generally with ours, the owners do typically pay for their parking, as well as if, I believe on some of them that have the garages built in, if they have an HOA type community, it is part of their rules and stipulations, the cars have to be parked inside of the garage. They cannot use the garage as storage.
Oh, interesting.
I think there's actually some of those in Canby already.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, I'll take a motion to approve these.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve ordinance, 1634, an ordinance adopting the housing efficiency measures, cottage cluster development and design standards, 16.21, planning unit development code updates, chapter 16.74 and 16.76, low density residential, chapter 16.16, and medium density residential, chapter 16.18, as part of the Canby Municipal Code TA 24-02 to a second reading on November 20, 2024.
Second.
Point, my slight confused mind, is this incorporating the 2 parking, or is this not what we're voting for?
That's a good question. Does this,
I would like you all to do the 3 items with plurality, please. So, yeah, if you.
we need to reincorporate that into the
Please,
motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me write that down then. We want 2 parking spots? And what were the other things here?
2 parking spots, exclude pathways from common,
Exclude pathways and then
common
the
area.
fence.
and then 3 and 6 foot based on current city standards.
To the 6 foot, right?
Yeah, and then the 3 foot is it's already in the code for sightlines, correct?
It says recommend 6 foot tall fencing be required. Is that where we're at, Jason? 6
Yeah.
foot? Okay.
Yeah, it would be, it's 6 and 3 foot.
All right, 3 and 6 foot. Okay, I will reword
Fence
it.
versus a hedge.
I'm sorry,
Got it.
one moment. Eileen, did you have a question for Don?
I just wanted to make sure that it was clear what section of code that was being amended. So,
So these will all be under the cottage cluster, which, great point, which
The
is.
16.21 is where I
16
note that.
Yes, please, 1621080.
Very good. I can do that. Okay. Scratch my last motion. Can we do, is that legal, Maya? Okay. I move to approve ordinance number 1634, an ordinance adopting the housing efficiency measures cottage cluster development and design standards 16.21 to include 2 parking spaces, exclude the pathways from the green spaces, and include 3 and 6 foot fencing requirements. Planning the Unit Development Code updates Chapter 16.74 and 16.76, Low Density Residential Chapter 16.16, and Medium Density Residential Chapter 16.18 as part of the Canby Municipal Code TA 24-02 to a second reading on November 20, 2024.
Second.
Okay. Motion is made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve ordinance 1634, an ordinance adopting the housing efficiency measures, cottage cluster development and design standards, 16.21, that include 2 parking spots per unit, excluding pathways from common courtyard development, and then 6 foot fencing and then 3 foot is needed for,
I think-
actually, it's just no 3 feet, it's just 6 foot.
Let's just, it's 6 foot, and then we'll make the
fences.
changes, because the 3 foot is already baked into the code. Yeah,
Right, so it's the
yeah.
6 foot
6 foot, yeah,
fences,
yeah.
not hedges, 6 foot fences.
Yeah,
In that section. Planning Unit Development Code updates 16.74 and 16.76. Low Density Residential Chapter 16.16 and Medium Density Residential Chapter 16.18 as part of the Canby Municipal Code TA 24-02 to a second reading on November 20th, 2024. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don, appreciate that.
Thanks, Don.
We will move into item 6 is ordinances and resolutions, so we have 2 more. First one is consider ordinance 1633, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to extend a 1 to 2 year contract with MSNW Group LLC in the amount of $144,960 per year for custodial services for the city of Canby, and this is the second reading. And again, this is for contract with the company that cleans City Hall, the library, Public Works, and other necessary city facilities. Any discussion or comment?
There's just one clarification I want to make. This will be extending it by 1 year. So we are coming up on the second year.
Okay.
So we will have to do something with our custodial services contract next year.
Meaning RFP type?
Correct.
Have to do, gotcha.
Or bringing it in-house,
Okay.
so.
Counselor Patton?
I move to adopt ordinance number 1633, authorizing the city administrator to extend the 1 to 2 year contract with MSNW Group LLC in the amount of $144,960 per year for custodial services for the city of Canby.
Motion been made by Counselor Patton and seconded by Counselor Maldonado to approve ordinance 1633, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to extend a 1 to 2 year contract with MSNW Group LLC in the amount of $144,960 per year for custodial services for the city of Canby. Second reading, roll call vote.
Counselor Patton?
Aye.
Counselor Maldonado?
Aye.
Counselor Davis?
Aye.
Counselor Stearns?
Aye.
Counselor Sassy?
Aye.
And Council President Hensley?
Aye.
Great. Motion carries 6-0. Next item is ordinance 1635, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract between the city of Canby and Barry Elsner and Hammond LLP for city attorney services. And this is first reading. Miss Eileen, I think, is giving us the breakdown.
Yes, so first of all, I want to welcome Emily Matazar, who's online, and this is her first meeting. Emily will be typically our backup. Emily G. will be the primary attorney that services the contract. So I just wanted to welcome Emily. This is an ordinance that would authorize the council to enter into a contract for the permanent city attorney services. So, but I have another ordinance that I need to walk on the agenda, ordinance 1636. And I'm going to attempt to kind of fold these together so that you understand what happened. So back in July of 2023, ordinance 1606 was approved by the council, which continued Barry Elsner services as interim city attorney and put a cap on the contract of $149,000. That was to comply with the city's quotation process. So the city has to receive quotes when it spends between $50,000 and $150,000. The staff report written indicated that this cap coincided with the formal quote process used in the procurement of this contract. I don't know whether there were attempts to get additional quotes from other providers or not. But the purchasing rules at the time indicated, as I said, between 150 and 50 and 150. In March of 2024, the council asked for a report tracking the monthly costs for Barry Elsner and Hammond. In May of 2024, the council reviewed the expenses for the interim city attorney to date, which were about $95,000 at the time. And I estimated that by the time the fiscal year ended, we would spend about $110,000. But the contract crossed fiscal years. What we didn't do, and by June and July, we had exceeded the 149. So what 1636 is doing is attempting to fix the interim agreement for city attorney services. So 1635 is good. But we need to make sure that we have erased the cap, which is what 1636 does. It takes the cap of 149.9 out of the equation. And allows us to continue to pay bills through the end of the fiscal year, or until December 20th, which is when ordinance 1635 goes into effect. So does that make sense? So 1636 is attempting to fix the overpayment for our interim city attorney contract, which expires at the end of this year. But by then, we will have 1635 into effect, which makes the permanent appointment of the city attorney.
And so, just to be clear, so when you say end of the year, it's the end of the fiscal year, not the calendar year?
The end of this calendar year.
Oh, it is the end of this calendar year?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Councilor Patton?
I figured I'd make this motion.
Oh, okay, hang on.
okay?
Well, any questions for staff? Okay. As long as everyone's good, then yes, sir, go ahead.
I move to approve ordinance number 1636 and ordinance amending ordinance number 1606 to delete the not-to-exceed amount in the contract between the City of Canby and Barry Elsner and Hammond LLP for interim city attorney services.
Second.
All right, so motion's been made for ordinance 1636 and ordinance amending ordinance number 1606 to delete the not-to-exceed amount in the contract between the City of Canby and Barry Elsner and Hammond LLP for interim city services. Any further discussion? Okay, for first reading, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, passes 6-0.
So that will be on the November 20th agenda for second reading.
Great. All right. So now we're back to 1635?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll make the motion, but I also want to make a comment first. I don't know if it's actually in the contract, because I can't recall. But I will say that this position is something that we were going to review as if it were our employee. We've always reviewed the city attorney. And so I personally would like to see the camera on so that we know she's there, not in the bathroom. I mean, I trust that she is, but also the public would like to know that she's there. So in the future, from now on, hi, Emily, thank you. But just, I'm thinking that really this, first, all transparency, I think, I feel that that should be important, that the camera is on unless there's some extenuating circumstance that, you know, she's ill, but she's still going to help us or something like that. I can understand. But as a general rule, I'd like to see the camera on for our attorney. And Mr. Doofman was great about that. So I just would like to see that piece continue.
Great.
So with that being said, I would move to approve ordinance number 1635, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract between the City of Canby and Beery Elsner Hammond LLP for city attorney services to a second reading on November 20, 2024.
Second.
All right, motion has been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve ordinance 1635, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into a contract between the City of Canby and Beery, Elsner, and Hammond LLP for city attorney services to a second reading on November 20th, 2024. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries 6-0 as well.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is old business. Miss Eileen, any old business to give us an update on?
No, this is, I think, the first agenda that we didn't have the city attorney on old business, so.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nice and clean.
Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
nice and clean now.
That's solved.
Okay. I don't have anything on the agenda necessarily for new business, so nope, okay. We'll move into mayor's business. I don't have much. A couple of thank yous to the business community downtown and city staff for putting on a tremendous downtown spectacular village. I know that Chief Tro is here, and I heard a rumor that we didn't have any candy as the PD and that you were stealing it from Canby Fire? Oh, it was the other way around. Okay.
It's like, wait, no.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got rumors straight here. No, you got time coming up. Let me take this away. So, okay. No, thank you. I mean, it was a great turnout from what I heard, even for cruddy weather. And I know that the businesses, I know it's a lot for them to take on with, you know, little goblins and ghouls running around, but it's a great event. And I think the turnout was tremendous. Thank you to everyone in Canby that has turned in their ballots. I know it's still being counted and decisions are still being made, but thank you to those that voted and got their ballots in on time. And we'll, I think, based on new policies and things, we have officially a couple more days, I think, until we get a full count and where we're at with things, but thank you for doing so. Clackamas County Coordinating Committee is tomorrow evening. The Region 1 Transportation Area Commission is, I think, not until December, so we won't have anything to report on that. Tomorrow evening is First Thursday, and we are doing a grand, reopening, ribbon cutting for the completion of Highway 99E. We're doing that with ODOT and the Chamber of Commerce. So if you're free, come on down. I don't know, is there cake and ice cream to celebrate the completion of this fabulous road?
I think so, but I don't recall.
There might be some refreshments, so
Yes.
I will keep my comments brief. I can't say that it'll be ice cream like we got this evening, so there's a joke behind that, but we'll skip on to the next thing. That's all that I have this evening. I'm sure I left something
What
out.
time is that supposed to happen?
Thank you. 4
4
o'clock
o'clock.
tomorrow is that ribbon cutting, and then, then it's First Thursday for downtown. So that's all that I have, and we're going to start with Councilor Patton this evening for council
Thank you.
reports.
So, I'll be attending the grand opening of the 99E and First Thursday, and if you have any questions for a council member or whatever, I will be working the tent. So you're more than welcome to stop by and grill me, or just don't throw tomatoes at me. Maybe apples?
Yeah.
I do like apples. So we'll see how that all works out. I attended the chamber luncheon the other day. I did want to thank Canby Pride, who put on our 2 open candidate forums. There wasn't a whole lot of options, and I wanted to thank all of those candidates who attended their respective forums. I really appreciate how they have stepped up and become positive members of this community. And I also wanted to point out, and this is something that I have been forgetting to make a point of for many meetings, is if you drive down North Redwood Street, which has been a problem street for many, many years, you will find that your kidneys are not bruised by the time you get to the end of it, and your teeth are all in place, because that is what it looks like when our streets are properly funded. And so for those who complain about our city streets, we do have the ability to do it when we have the funding. So be prepared for that to come up. And just goes to show that when we have the money to do the thing, we will do the thing for the community. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Maldonado.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you, sir. Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also going to be very brief. I'll echo your comments on Spectacular Village. It was, even though it was a very soggy evening, we had lots of little ghosts and goblins and police officers running around town. Sorry, Jim, but there were more police officers and firemen this year. And T-Rexes and Lightning McQueens, and the chicken that was downtown actually came to my door later that night. So, and I live off of Redwood, so I can attest that Redwood is much better now. But as far as liaison meetings, like you said, C4 is tomorrow. We've got traffic safety next week. We've got street maintenance task force next week as well. So all the things are coming up. It's just kind of early in the month. So I will have a more robust report next time. Thank you.
Great. Councilor Davis.
Thank you. I won't comment about. I have respect for my police chief.
That's great.
Anyway, the Park and Rec, another great meeting with the Park and Rec. We continue to have people show up and make comments, and most of the comments were very positive. Thanking Jerry Nelzine and Public Works for trimming the trees back along the walking path over at Maple Street Park. They did an excellent job with that. Also, the lighting, the electrical work continued to happen at Maple Street Park for the lights that are going in. And that was my understanding was supposed to be completed at the end of October. I haven't heard whether or not it was accomplished or not at this point. We did have a representative from the Auburn Farms neighborhood, who is the neighborhood association president that's participating, just coming to our committees to stay tuned in regards to the park over at Dodge Farm and Auburn Farms. Very interested into the progress of that. So we updated her. She seemed satisfied. They did do down at the community park Friday, October 25th, they did a ribbon cutting for the celebration of the native plant down at the community park. That was very nicely done. And Kathy Smith, if you've noticed, a lot of trees planted along Highway 99. It was a rather rainy day that day, and so everybody there was motivated to get them in the ground and get out of there. So all those were taken care of as well. So on the Adult Center, that meeting is later this month, so I have no report from the Adult Center. And the fire department continues to be busy. And also, just as an awareness for the rest of the council, we'll be holding an open house on December 14th, kind of as inviting people to say goodbye to, on my retirement, as well as possibly we're working out the details for the swearing in of new Chief Matt Dale. So there'll be invitations sent out. We'll advertise it on the website and the Facebook sites and stuff like that so people can attend. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, sir. Counselor Stearns.
Got two things that I would kind of want to talk about in the council. One is, as I think we all aware, we all received our property tax bill, those of us with property. And I thought it would be a good idea sometime, and I talked to Eileen about this someday, a work session or something to go over the property tax bill and each line item and explain maybe to the community what they are, who's responsible for each bill on there, and what we can do to either increase it or decrease it, and what is being paid for. Just as an example, I don't think anybody, that's non-controversial, is I looked at the bill real carefully the first time and noticed that I'm paying money to the Port of Portland, and I'm like, I don't know what we can do about it, but it's good to be able to go through and itemize and say, this is what you as citizens are paying for, this is what it costs you. We can use a typical property tax bill for that, but I think that would be a good thing to do. There's anything I also talked with Eileen a little bit about, which is a little bit sort of maybe a little touchy, but I thought it would need to be brought out, is that in my work and with my, I get a lot of people who are in different business communities and stuff throughout the, and I listen to a lot of, planning, business planning, that sort of thing. And I'm afraid that I'm talking against several different unrelated people have reported that working with Canby for development can be frustrating for certain developers. And I wanted to bring it up not because I want to make a criticism and say everybody's doing a bad job, but I think when you hear that, it's important that people address the issue and see what can be done to smooth out the process a little better. And without getting any specifics, because some of these people don't want to put their hand out because they're afraid that they'll be known as a troublemaker and the problems might be even made worse, We're not talking about, we're talking about things about expectations not being met. We're talking about things like processes being slower, convoluted, coming in with expectations that were different than what they started out with, and those kind of things. And I think there's an opportunity there to sit down with maybe some of these people and different departments and say, hey, how can we improve the process? I'm not talking about changing laws or changing any fees, but to make sure that somebody who develops in Canby can know what to expect to start out with and be able to have things processed in the future. And without, and of course this involves the fire department as well, because I've been hearing about that as well. So I know the city and the fire department are two distinct entities, but it might be good to have them on the table as well. So that way, we do all the process of approving it, but once a project's approved, expectations should be in place, and as long as there's no great deviations, then the process should be made as smooth as possible after that. So I just wanted to bring that up as an issue, as something that I think could be addressed. It could make development a little bit less frustrating. And I'm trying to put this as delicately as possible, but when I was having some of these conversations, there was fire in some people's eyes and veiled threats of lawsuits that, like, next time, I'm going to the attorney first or something like that. And I'm not saying that to condemn anybody, but I'm saying that usually happens when there's miscommunication, when people have one set of expectations and they're not filled out. So I just wanted to bring that up and maybe invite to review the processes to make sure that there's no, as few as possible, frustrating delays.
And Councilor Stearns, I did receive your email today where who it is that you're talking about is willing to meet with.
Well, one of the people, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Not everybody I've been talked to is willing to meet because,
But I appreciate somebody
and I don't want to
stepping up.
make it to like, oh, you're bad and,
Right.
or no, it's his fault. I just want to say, hey, where's the friction and see if we can smooth out the friction
Right,
points.
because without specifics. it's
Yeah, and I don't want to go
hard
into specifics because I would be telling you in the council secondhand information, which would probably be wrong because that's what happens with secondhand information. So I don't know what specifics is, but I do know the frustration is there.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Counselor Sassy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Heritage Landmark met. We still need 3 to 4 members. There was 3 of us there the other night. And it's hard to get anything done when you don't have a full board. So we talked about coming in April, May, depending on the weather. We're going to do gravestone cleaning at Zion Cemetery. And then they found out that City Hall, the basement portion is going to get new windows, historical type. They're aluminum now, they're going to put in wood. So it'll keep with the tradition of the historic. So, yes, just the basement part. So you won't see much of it because of the grates around it and the fencing, but that's next on the list for them. And then I thank them. That was my last meeting that I will have with them because their next meeting is February 3rd, so they will have a new liaison. So I thank them, and that's all I have.
Scott, Counselor Sassy, I know that with some of our committees that you're saying that there might be a quorum issue for them to get things.
Sometimes, yes.
I think with some of our committees and whatnot, we have language in there that if it's work, we did with CAT, I think, where we changed it to where it's a quorum of the number of committee members.
Yeah.
So if you've got 3 committee members and, active members, but you still have 3 spots open that you still can then, based on, if a majority, so.
And we do have, I believe, 1 or 2 applicants. They're not in there yet, but I think at their next meeting, they'll have at least 1, correct? I don't want to say their name, but I think we have 1 applicant coming in, which will be very helpful, so.
Okay. Great. City administrator staff, and staff reports.
Council, one item that I have is that on Wednesday, November 20th, from 4 to 7 p.m. is an open house at Willamette Falls Studios. We can't attend because we'll be in council meeting, but they are willing to have a special orientation, if you will, or a tour at 3 p.m. The mayor has indicated he's interested in attending that, but I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware if you wanted to join the mayor in that event.
20th, you said?
The 20th, and it would be at 3 p.m. at Willamette Falls Studios. So if you can attend, that would be great. So if you would get back with Maya, and she will coordinate that. Just see if I have anything else. Most of my time of late has been spent kind of getting caught up and working on the city attorney matter, so I don't have anything else to report tonight.
Okay. I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Can you, based on Jim's report there about the lighting project at Maple Street Park, could you find out maybe where that's at and give us an email update on that?
Happy to.
Thank you. And then for the council, two calendar things to be noodling and be thinking of. And This will be on the agenda, I think, for the next meeting here coming up. At least this one is. So the first meeting in January falls on January 1st. And so be thinking about moving, that it'll be on the next agenda for conversation, but moving into January 7th as a conversation piece. Yeah, so, because moving it to the 2nd creates complications with other committees and things like that, so it'd be the following week, so please be noodling that. And then put in your calendar, and Eileen and Maya, the goal-setting session, we have tentatively hold dates for,
January 31st and February 1st, so it's a Friday and a Saturday.
so hold those dates as soon as we know what the council makeup will look like. We'll iron that out, and there'll be conversation with the group about if we want 2 days, a half a day and a half a day, or what, so.
Did you say January 31st and the 1st?
And the first,
Yeah.
Feb. 1.
Okay.
So just, again, put,
That's on the next one, or next week's.
that is just going to be just for you guys to put it in your calendars to hold it for now, and we'll see where.
Not an agenda item.
It may not, it probably doesn't need to be. We can probably just discuss that as a group, as a discussion item. So, okay. Great. And citizen input? No? All right. Seeing nobody rushing us. Maya, action review.
You've approved the consent agenda, approved ordinance number 1634 to include the 2 parking places per unit, exclude pathways from common courtyard requirements, and the 6-foot fencing. Ordinance 1635 and 1636 to a second reading on November 20th, 2024, and adopted ordinance number 1633.
Great. Before I take a motion to adjourn, just a reminder, we do have an executive session here following our meeting, but we will take a brief break to reset and get set for that. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, quick question. For the executive session, could I have the number of the executive session that we're going into? And then also, has the proper notification been given to the city administrator for this executive session?
The ORS for that is going to be 192.660, parent 2, parent I. And yes, the city administrator has been notified of it and has asked that the conversation be done in executive session.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Patton.
Before we get to that, just throw this out there, considering we're in the process of election. Would it make sense to reach out to the other folks that may or may not be on council, that there is a tentative retreat of sorts for this goal setting so that they can be aware of that should one of them become a member of council?
Thank you for thinking of that, sir.
Calendar note, Ben. Okay, all that being said, I move we adjourn.
Motion's been made to adjourn, seconded by, first by Council President Hensley, second by Council Maldonado. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, Canby. I will take a motion.